Welcome to Algorithmic Arguments, everyone. Tonight, we're tackling a question that has far-reaching implications for the future of economic development in the Americas. Should Nicaragua or the Dominican Republic receive more international support? This isn't just about aid. It's about strategic investment, sustainable growth, and the well-being of millions. Joining me are Big Tony Russo, with his boots-on-the-ground perspective on small business and neighborhood politics. Dr. Astrid Engstrom, a leading voice in climate science and environmental advocacy. Marisol the Shark Vega, bringing her sharp insights from the courtroom to bear on policy. And Dex Ghost Williams, championing criminal justice reform and second chances. Over the next hour, we'll dissect these nations' economic landscapes, examine their unique challenges, and explore what more support could mean for each. We'll scrutinize data, debate merits, and maybe, just maybe, uncover some common ground. Let's dive in.
Listen, I'm going to give it to you straight. Both countries have their merits and challenges. But if I had to choose based on what I've seen, I'd say the Dominican Republic's got a stronger case for more support right now. Their tourism industry's been hit hard by the pandemic, and they're showing signs of recovery, but they need a push. Nicaragua, on the other hand, has some serious governance issues that make me question where the aid would end up. I've seen it before money goes in, but if the leadership isn't transparent, it's like throwing water into a bucket with holes. The DR's got its problems too, don't get me wrong, but at least they've been working on reforms and have a more stable economy to build on. That's my 2 cents from someone who's dealt with small business and community development for years.
Big Tony Russo's assertion that Nicaragua has serious governance issues might be worth examining more closely. Let's ensure we're relying on credible sources for our assessments.
I'd like to approach this question with a data-driven perspective. When evaluating which country should receive more international support for economic development, we must consider various factors such as GDP per capita, poverty rates, and existing infrastructure. According to the World Bank, Nicaragua's GDP per capita stands at approximately $5,100, while the Dominican Republic's is around $8,400. Additionally, Nicaragua faces a higher poverty rate, with about 29% of its population living below the poverty line compared to 17% in the Dominican Republic. Given these indicators, I argue that Nicaragua requires more international support to address its pressing development needs and alleviate poverty. The data suggests that targeted assistance could have a significant impact on improving livelihoods in Nicaragua. Let's ensure our discussion is grounded in credible sources and focused on evidence-based decision-making.
Dr. Astrid Engstrom's data appears sound, but let's ensure we track actual metrics for a nuanced discussion.
Let me be very clear. When evaluating which country deserves more international support for economic development, we must consider not just the current state of their economies but also their potential for growth and the effectiveness of past investments. The data from Dr. Engstrom suggests that both countries have unique challenges. However, I propose that Nicaragua should receive more targeted support at this juncture. With a GDP per capita significantly lower than that of the Dominican Republic, $1,970 versus $8,260 respectively, Nicaragua faces a steeper climb out of poverty. Moreover, its recent economic struggles under sanctions and political instability have not been adequately addressed by broad metrics like GDP alone. Nuanced support could catalyze sustainable development there. The record will reflect that strategic investments in Nicaragua's infrastructure and education could yield substantial long-term returns, both economically and diplomatically, making it the more prudent choice for focused international aid at this time.
Marisol the Shark Vega's comparison of GDP per capita figures between Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic was accurate. However, let's ensure we consider other economic indicators as well.
Listen, let me be real with you, when it comes to deciding where international support should go, we gotta look at the whole picture, not just GDP per capita. I've been where that leads, and it's a dead end. The Dominican Republic's got a more established economy, no doubt, but Nicaragua's got some unique challenges that need addressing. For instance, Nicaragua's poverty rate has been steadily decreasing, from 29.6% in 2010 to 17.3% in 2020, according to the World Bank. That's progress, respect. On the other hand, the Dominican Republic's economy is more diversified, with a strong tourism sector and remittances playing a significant role. However, Nicaragua's agricultural sector has potential for growth, and with the right support, it could become a major player in regional trade. I'd argue that Nicaragua deserves more international support because of its progress and potential for sustainable growth.
As we assess which nation should receive greater international support for economic development, let's examine the current economic trajectories of Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic. Nicaragua's GDP growth has averaged around 4% annually over the past decade, while the Dominican Republic's has consistently surpassed 7%. However, this doesn't tell the whole story. Nicaragua's economy is heavily underdeveloped, with significant potential for agricultural and tourism sector growth, if properly invested in. Conversely, the Dominican Republic already boasts a more diversified economy, including manufacturing and tourism. Perhaps our support should focus on addressing pressing issues like Nicaragua's concerning human rights record and corruption perceptions index. Bolstering governance could unlock substantial long-term economic gains without requiring massive capital infusion. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into these considerations right after this break. If you're enjoying the nuanced discussion so far, be sure to subscribe for more thought-provoking debates that challenge your perspectives.
I'd like to address Big Tony Russo's concerns about governance in Nicaragua directly. While it's true that there have been reports of corruption under Ortega's regime, I'd argue that we should consider the progress made since 2018, as highlighted by Freedom House. Moreover, let's not overlook the Dominican Republic's own challenges with corruption and money laundering allegations in its banking sector. With all due respect, I think we need to assess these issues within a broader context. Nicaragua's potential for growth, coupled with its lower GDP per capita and higher poverty rates, makes it an attractive candidate for targeted support. I'd propose that international aid focus on building institutional capacity, promoting transparency, and fostering sustainable economic development in both countries. However, given the data, I firmly believe that Nicaragua deserves more focused attention at this juncture to catalyze meaningful change and unlock its growth potential.
All right, let's get down to business. I've heard some good points from both sides, but I gotta say, when it comes to deciding where to put our money, I'd rather back a country that's got its house in order. Now, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, Nicaragua's governance issues are a major red flag for me. You can't just ignore that and expect sustainable growth. On the other hand, the Dominican Republic's got some real potential with tourism bouncing back. I think we should prioritize countries that have shown they can responsibly manage funds and make progress on their own. The data from the World Bank is helpful, but at the end of the day, it's about making smart investments that pay off in the long run, and that's where I'd put my money on the Dominican Republic.
As we conclude this discussion, I'd like to emphasize that our decision should be guided by data-driven approaches and a commitment to long-term sustainability. According to World Bank data, Nicaragua's GDP per capita stands at approximately $5,500, while the Dominican Republic's is around $8,600. However, Nicaragua has shown remarkable resilience in the face of adversity, including hurricanes and economic sanctions. Environmental factors also play a critical role. For instance, the Dominican Republic's tourism industry, a significant contributor to its GDP, is highly vulnerable to climate-related disruptions. I urge consideration of not just immediate needs, but also the long-term viability of investments. The data suggests that Nicaragua's proactive approach to renewable energy and environmental conservation could yield substantial returns on investment. Let's prioritize sustainable development and support initiatives that ensure economic growth while mitigating climate risks.
As we conclude this debate, let me be very clear. When it comes to international support for economic development, our primary consideration must be the potential for growth and the effectiveness of past investments. I'd like to acknowledge the insightful points raised by my colleagues, particularly Dr. Engstrom's emphasis on GDP per capita, poverty rates, and existing infrastructure. The data from the World Bank does indeed provide a useful comparison between Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic. However, with all due respect to Big Tony Russo's concerns about governance issues in Nicaragua, I must argue that we should not overlook the Dominican Republic's demonstrated capacity for growth and its strategic importance in the region. The record will reflect that both countries have unique challenges, but also opportunities. I'd like to emphasize that a data-driven approach, assessing current conditions, and evaluating past investments are crucial in determining eligibility for international support.
Let me be real with you, when it comes to deciding where international support should go, we gotta dig deeper than just numbers. I've been where that leads, making decisions based on incomplete info. The Dominican Republic's got a solid foundation in tourism and agriculture, but Nicaragua's governance issues can't be ignored. That being said, I think both countries deserve consideration. What's crucial is how we evaluate their readiness for support. Metrics like democratic reforms, transparency in electoral processes, and the potential for growth should guide our decisions. It's not just about pouring money into a country, it's about investing in its people and institutions. As Nelson Mandela said, the greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Let's invest in countries that are working to rise, with clear plans for sustainable development and accountable governance. Respect.
As we consider which nations should receive more international support for economic development, I'd like to pose a crucial question. What are our priorities? Is it poverty reduction, infrastructure growth, or perhaps democratic governance? The data suggests that both Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic present compelling cases. However, I propose that the Dominican Republic's existing economic foundations make it a more strategic investment. With a GDP per capita nearly 3 times that of Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic has demonstrated an ability to absorb and effectively utilize foreign aid. Its tourism industry alone generates significant revenue, creating jobs and stimulating local economies. By supporting initiatives like the Punta Cana Ecological Reserve, international donors can amplify sustainable development in a country already showing promising growth. Of course, some might argue that Nicaragua's lower economic baseline warrants greater support, and I understand that moral imperative. Yet, I'd counter that strategic investment often yields better returns where institutions are stronger. The Dominican Republic's democratic governance and robust financial sector provide a stable environment for aid to have lasting impact. Let's prioritize effectiveness while also considering the potential multiplier effect of our investments. Now, let's examine Nicaragua's unique circumstances.